Good evening and welcome to This Week at Little Hills. I hope that this week has started off swimmingly for you. Why do we have that phrase swimmingly? Why do we like getting in pools? It's because they're refreshing. We're in still, calm, pleasant waters that seem to take away stress and cool us off on a hot day. But sometimes waters don't feel very refreshing, do they? They instead feel like they could drown us. We use that metaphorically as well. The uncertainties of life that feel like there are rapids that could drown us. As we continue our series, 52 verses from 52 books in 52 weeks, we find that the Israelites are at both the physical and metaphorical waters of uncertainty. They're at the banks of the Jordan preparing to enter the land that God has promised them. And over across that river, they see peoples that appear fierce and well able to defend themselves and to kill the Israelites. And in the midst of that, what do they get from the Lord? They get lots of rules and regulations. We're turning to the book of Numbers today. And that might seem like an odd thing to receive from the Lord in such a time of uncertainty. But let's see what the Lord provided. We see how he's actually helping them through those rough waters through it. Very last verse in Numbers 36:13 says, "These are the commandments and the rules that the Lord commanded through Moses to the people of Israel in the plains of Moab by the Jordan at Jericho." You've probably tried a Bible reading plan and perhaps found yourself getting stuck in Leviticus and Numbers. How many people have had their plans to read through the Bible halted there as they run into the census numbers and the rules and the regulations? It can be so intimidating, and it's hard to see how it even applies to us. Temple sacrifices, what do they have to tell us? What did they have to tell really a people who was afraid about what they would face on the other side of those river waters that appeared so scary? Well, they had something important to tell them. They told them that they had a God who loved them. When we think about getting into uncertain waters, what gives us comfort? A lifeguard, someone who can provide some regulation to it. Why do we like a pool? We know that there aren't going to be currents underneath there provide an undertow that pull us under. We know that it's safe. And as God was calling his people together, he provided a set of rules and regulations so that they could feel safe, that they would know that they were his people, and they knew how to live as his people. Now today we may look at it and say, but a lot of those regulations, what do they really tell us? It feels like we have the storms of life, the thunder and lightning over our heads, and we look at, here's how many goats to sacrifice and cattle and so on. What does this really mean? Why did God provide those to his people then? It was to tell them how to relate to him and how to follow him. And even today, though Jesus has fulfilled the temple sacrifices, and some of the rules and regulations we read about, for example, in Numbers, applied specifically to the nation of Israel during that time, we still learn an awful lot about the God who's given us his commands in the Bible and given us his grace in the Bible, a God who is our lifeguard today. He tells us that we can follow him, and yes, we may hear the thunder overhead. Yes, the waters can look really choppy and be choppy, but we have our lifeguard there with us through it all. So as we think about what he tells us to do, we think, but life feels so uncertain. Let us hear that as him offering that guidance on how to be with him and how to experience the still refreshing waters of his grace. Hope this encourages you this week through whatever waters you might find yourself in. If there's any way I can be praying for you this week, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you, or send a prayer request down in the comments below. You don't have to go underwater, just down page and leave a comment. I'd love to pray for you. I know others would as well. And I hope that you'll join me tomorrow night for Steadfast as we think about one of those commands that God has given us today. Just as those commands he gave the people of Israel then, we're calling them together as one people, so too today he calls us to be the people of God, unified together. We're going to think about the call to unity, how that applies, how that should comfort us, how that should make us as the church more effective in sharing God's love, and how it's pleasing to our God. And ultimately even builds us up, just as we can jump in this beautiful pool party of God's love. Hope you have a wonderful week, and I do hope the rest of your week goes swimmingly. I'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow night and again next week.